There was a time when I believed, when I insisted, that The Great Gatsby was the great American novel. I've since decided that F. Scott Fitzgerald's Jazz Age masterpiece, 100 years ago published today, is not broad enough in scope to deserve the accolade. I mean, how can a novel about rich white people on Long Island, it's a sort of Real Housewives of East Egg or a lost season of The White Lotus, be comprehensively American enough to wear the crown? Even so, if The Great Gatsby isn't the great American novel, it's certainly a great American novel. It's also indisputably a great American novel. Fitzgerald manages to stuff so many peculiarly American fascinations into the book's economical 47,093 words. Old money, sudden wealth, fame, name-dropping, sports, gambling, snobbery, slumming, organized crime, reinvention, deceit, gossip, violence, sex, straight and gay, infidelity, fancy automobiles, guns, swimming pools, Wall Street, racism, that even now, a full century after its publication, Gatsby feels as relevant as when Coolidge was in the White House, booze was illegal, and Nazis were still a fringe party. Consider our current president is a Jay Gatsby gone bad. He apprenticed at the foot of his own mobbed-up Meyer Wolfsheim and Roy Cohn. The cabinet is littered with abusive white supremacist Tom Buchanans. Daisy would fit right in at Mar-a-Lago. East Egg is not unlike Palm Beach. Spoiled rich people still behave the same spoiled way and remain objects of our voyeuristic curiosity. Only now we get to keep up with them on reality TV. None of Fitzgerald's character names sound anachronistic. I mean, Jordan Baker could be a 19-year-old TikTok influencer. Even today, despite the benefit of Google and a full century's worth of newer writing, you would be hard-pressed to find a better descriptor of the MAGA quintessence than what Fitzgerald wrote about the Buchanans. Quote, "They were careless people. They smashed up things and creatures and then retreated back into their money or their vast carelessness or whatever it was that kept them together and let other people clean up the mess they had made." Then again, should we really be surprised? It's the 20s, after all. In the case of The Great Gatsby, the reviews were mostly positive. Hemingway cites one by Gilbert Seldes, a well-known book critic. Quote, "It could not have been better. It could only have been better if Gilbert Seldes had been better," unquote. Commercially, however, Gatsby was a disappointment. In the 15 years between its publication in 1925 and Fitzgerald's death in 1940, royalties from the book totaled some $5,000. Adjusted for inflation, that's still not a lot of money. Only after his death in 1940, when the Council on Books in Wartime decided to include Gatsby in the Armed Services editions, catalog of titles distributed to U.S. soldiers during the Second World War, did Gatsby become great. In the last few years of his life, Fitzgerald earned little from any of his novels. For the entire year of 1936, when he was trying to stay sober and writing the crack-up for Esquire and giving humiliating interviews to the New York Post, his book royalties for Gatsby plus everything else came to a grand total of $80. That's $1,841.57 in today's dollars, roughly an average month's rent. By then, the early windfall had run out, the creative well was dry, Zelda was living in a sanitarium in North Carolina, and he was holed up in a cheap Asheville hotel to be close to her. As a public figure, Fitzgerald was widely regarded as passé, a has-been, an artifact from a bygone age. Worse, from a decadent decade that had nothing to offer a nation suffering through the Great Depression. He was, in a word, sunk. Now, the standard cure for one who is sunk is to consider those in actual destitution or physical suffering. This is an all-weather beatitude for gloom in general and fairly salutary daytime advice for everyone, Fitzgerald wrote. But at 3 o'clock in the morning, a forgotten package has the same tragic importance as a death sentence. And the cure doesn't work. And in the real dark night of the soul, it is always 3 o'clock in the morning, day after day. At the end, Fitzgerald was living in Hollywood with a British gossip columnist. He managed to stay sober for a solid 12 months while he worked on The Last Tycoon, but did not live long enough to see it through. Years of heavy drinking and ill health caught up to him. He died of a massive heart attack in 1940, 4 days before Christmas. He was just 44 years old. Much has changed in the 85 years since his death. The Nazis were stamped out in Germany only to reemerge 8 decades later in the United States, thus defying Fitzgerald's adage that there are no second acts in American lives. The Great Gatsby became a perennial bestseller and joined the canon of great American fiction. But the novel itself, as an art form, has become less central to the popular culture, regarded in many circles as nothing more than a blueprint for the inevitable film adaptation. This Fitzgerald predicted, quote, "I saw that the novel, which at my maturity was the strongest and supplest medium for conveying thought and emotion from one human being to another, was becoming subordinated to a mechanical and communal art that, whether in the hands of Hollywood merchants or Russian idealists, was capable of reflecting only the tritest thought, the most obvious emotion. It was an art in which words were subordinate to images, where personality was worn down to the inevitable low gear of collaboration. As long past as 1930, I had a hunch that the talkies would make even the best-selling novelist as archaic as silent pictures." Now, his antipathy towards motion pictures, I think, is a bitter byproduct of his own failure to adapt to that medium. He was a lousy screenwriter. Even Gatsby, short as it is, with its bevy of memorable characters and solid plot, resists film treatment because of its structure. The denouement is too long and too internal, which works wonderfully in a novel but makes for an anticlimactic movie, even one where the title character is played by peak Robert Redford. But Fitzgerald had a point about the continuing obsolescence of novels. As a novelist myself, I find this cause for concern. Marking the centennial of its publication on my calendar, I wondered, how many Americans under the age of, say, 30 have read The Great Gatsby? How many were taught it in their high school English classes? The book was assigned to neither of my Gen Z kids, and they went to different high schools. Now, forgive me, this is when I assumed the part of the old man thundering at the neighborhood kids to get off his lawn. Novels, in general, seem to no longer be the backbone of the high school English curricula. And under the current administration, the Department of Education is set for demolition. In the not-too-distant future, our sophomores and juniors might be reading nothing but Trump-branded Bibles, hagiographies of Elon Musk, and the art of the deal. The novel, that surefire antidote to doom scrolling, is going the way of opera, epic poetry, dark rooms, and vinyl. And that's why I have undertaken this quixotic project, what I hope will be the first in a series of classic literary works reissued by 4-6 Press. Basically, I wanted an excuse to deep dive into a book I love and write about what I found. And I was curious to know what my contemporaries thought of Gatsby, so I recruited 2 of my favorite writers, my friends Ronlyn Domang and Diana Speckler, to contribute commentary. And their pieces are even more brilliant than I hoped they would be, and are alone worth the modest cover price. Most of all, what I want is for people who've never read Gatsby to read it for the first time, and for people who read it a long time ago to revisit it, before it gets banned. The goal of this centennial edition of Fitzgerald's classic can be summed up in 5 words. Make America Great Gatsby again.